Sup you beautiful people, hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Deku Had the Powers of inFAMOUS. All he ever wanted was to be a hero. All he ever wanted was to save people. Well, be careful what you wish for Izuku Midoriya, because the universe just might grant it, in the worst possible way. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel, after watching this video. Don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description box down below. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Are you sure you haven't under or overpacked? His mother worried, hands clutched together anxiously as Izuku put on his shoes. They'd been having this discussion even since he had woken up, his mother chiming in over item he put in his bag. He knew why she was being so overbearing. Hell, if positions were reversed, he would be worried sick, so he played along. It was the least he could do. Yes, Mom, I'm sure, he said with confidence, getting up and letting himself get used to his new uniform, which consisted of a gray suit and dark green pants with a bright red tie. He rolled his shoulders, the still stiff fabric hugging his muscled body tightly as he turned to her and put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Everything is going to be fine. It wasn't a promise. He couldn't make it a promise. Where he was going, what he was planning on becoming, danger would part of the job description, and they both knew it. I hope so, she answered back with a thin smile, tears forming in the corner of her eyes as she got close to him, picking any stray pieces of lint, fixing his hair and straightening his tie. Making sure her son looked presentable, and to show those teachers that he wasn't some punk, and to treat him right. But just let me fuss over you one last time, for my sake, she asked, lips beginning to tremble as she cupped his freckled face in her hands, the tears now flowing like streams down her cheeks as she looked into her son's eyes. I'm proud of Izuku, she said, lovingly as she moved her hands down and gave her son the tightest hug she could. Go, and be the best hero you can be. Izuku smiled and kissed his mother on the cheek, giving her a wave goodbye before he opened the door and moved towards the future. Once he reached the bottom of his apartment, he saw Mineta waiting for him, the small boy having decided to walk with him. Each giving a nod to each other, they fell into the familiar pattern, silently walking to UA before Mineta began speaking. Sorry about ruining the mood with you and Tsu, he apologized. No, it's fine. He reassured his friend, shaking his head. In truth, he was kind of happy he was there. He wouldn't have really known what to do after. Obviously, with a person like Mineta being his best friend, he had seen enough material to know what came next, but there was a world of difference between seeing and being that person. Not to mention how Tsu must be feeling about all of this. He had offered for all of them to walk together, but she had declined, and he hoped he didn't do something wrong. But do you like her? Like that I mean, Mineta asked. I mean, she's cute, Izuku admitted, face growing red. While he wasn't exactly good with hints and had never really talked to a girl, she like always had been about as blunt as a sledgehammer with what she wanted. And I wouldn't have said no. Well, you better hurry up and get her. Otherwise you'll never catch up to me, Mineta beamed as Izuku snapped his head to look at him. Who and when? Izuku asked disbelievingly, more than curious as to who he was talking about. Mineta then went on to talk about in exhaustive detail about how he had bravely saved the Vine girl Shiozaki and how she had kissed his when she had woken up. Yeah, that figures. Figured the only girl who would kiss you would be unconscious, Izuku mocked as Mineta scowled at him. Yeah, laugh it up, lightning rod. Just you wait, in a few weeks Miss Bible Thumper will be mine, he announced with full certainty. Will that be before or after she nails you to a cross after she finds your search history? Izuku questioned, thoroughly enjoying the playful ribbing. Fuck off, Mineta sighed, hanging his head as Izuku wheezed with laughter, grasping the shorter boy's shoulder and jostling him as Mineta began to laugh as well despite himself. He and Mineta walked in silence the rest of the way, interspersed only by them cursing under their breath as they got to the school and tried to find their class. The school was massive, and without a map it was like a labyrinth before finally they found it. And as the pair looked at the huge door, one thought came to mind. Why would they even need a door this big, he questioned, craning his neck to see the top of the door that nearly reached the ceiling. Welcome to my world, Mineta joked as Izuku smirked and opened the door, his only hope being that he wouldn't see Bakugo. Get your feet off the desk. You disrespect the school and those that made it, an obnoxious voice rang. What junior high did a side character like you come from? Izuku could literally feel himself cringe in annoyance as he heard those familiar voices. Why could he not have this one thing? Why did he have to be in the same class as these two? My name is Tenya Ida and I am from Sumi Private Academy, he explained as the blonde cackled at the information, grin wide and teeth showing. Sumi huh, oh I'm gonna enjoy crushing you, he said as the taller boy recoiled, asking if he even aimed to be a hero. So that's what it looks like from the outside, he thought to himself, finding amusement in the fact that for once neither he nor Mineta were in the blonde's crosshairs. That feeling of happiness was short-lived however as the two, along with the rest of the class, all finally noticed them. It was then too that he noticed how big the class was. It said with the envelope that there were to be 2 classes of 20, but he could see 30 people, and among them was Tsuyu. When their eyes met she looked away, and Izuku felt his heart sink. But he didn't get to focus on her for long as the blue-haired boy marched up to him, arms stiff like a robot's. Hello again. We didn't introduce each other when we first met. I am Tenya I, he tried to say. I know who you are, my name is Izuku Midoriya, he interrupted, not really wanting to rehear his introduction. But what he didn't expect was for Ida to bow his head, shocking the young boy. I am sorry Midoriya, I misjudged your character, he apologized, as Midoriya wondered what had brought this on. When I first saw you, I thought you were nothing but a villain to be, a vigilante whose only goal was to disrupt, but when I saw you save that girl I understood your intentions were pure. Izuku just stood there for a moment, his initial opinion of him slowly rising. Sure, he had been aggravating in the beginning, but he had helped him back to the bus, and he was apologizing. That's what happens when you judge a book by its cover, Mineta announced, smiling smugly at the much taller boy's excessive apology. It's okay, you don't have to bow, he said, trying to get him to stop bowing. While the apology was nice, he didn't want it to go that far. Ida seemed to accept that, leaning back up and adjusting his tie with the same robotic precision. Oh hey, we're in the same class, they heard a bubbly voice said as all three turned to see the brown-haired girl from before. Thanks for saving me, you were amazing when you called down that lightning strike. She beamed as she repeatedly raised and lowered her hand in imitation of his moves. If you feel like talking, go home, a low, grumpy voice said as they all looked behind the girl to see what looked like a greasy homeless man in a filthy sleeping bag. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down, pathetic, the man said as he sucked on juice box and unzipped himself out of his bag. As he began walking forward, forcing the group back by his presence, until they and he were all inside, Izuku wondered how someone like him could even get inside, and if this man was potentially dangerous. I'm your homeroom teacher Shota Aizawa, put these on and head out to the field. The changing rooms are on the first floor, he said, pulling a large shrink-wrapped bag filled with what he thought were their uniforms. Watching the teacher walk away, everyone did as they were told, and each one took a uniform and filed out. Girls' locker room, Tsuyu didn't draw much attention to herself as all the girls changed. Though she did think it was rather crowded, as she had to share it with 12 other girls, the room itself having been obviously designed for fewer people to be in it all at once. The memories of Izuku played back in her head as she put on her gym clothes, the warmth of his body against hers, those shining blue eyes that spoke of safety and acceptance. And she had ruined it. Why did I do that? She raged at herself inside her mind. The first person to treat her like anything other some bug-eyed frog girl, and she tries to kiss him out of nowhere. She had ruined her first friendship because she couldn't control herself. She was better than this. She wanted to scream, she was so mad at herself, but her attention was diverted when she heard what the others girls were talking about. So he's cute, right? Mina asked the invisible girl who Tsuyu hadn't learned the name of yet. Though anyone would have been deceived into thinking they had known each other for years from how they talked to one another. My aunt can't stop talking about him. Oh my god, yes, the invisible girl squeaked, and it was clear to understand who the topic of their conversation was. Hey, you said something about Midoriya saving you, she said. Louder so the brown-haired girl, along with everyone else, could hear. The girl shot up quick as that, turning around with a hint of red to her cheeks. Oh, is that his name? The girl said in surprise, having up until this point not heard his name. Yeah, I was trapped under some rubble, and the zero-pointer was about to crush me, so he blew it up, she said as everyone in the room turned to look at her. Tsuyu felt that flame of jealousy begin to scorch her, even as she fought to suppress it. He wasn't hers, so she had no right to be angry. How did he do that? A tall girl with raven hair questioned curiously. He called down lightning from the sky, Ibara said with her own subtle look of amazement. That was him. What zone was he in? Another shorter girl gasped, with dark purple hair and what looked like earphone jacks for earlobes. The brown-haired girl then re-entered the conversation by saying that he was in Zone B, which shocked her even more as she had been in Zone F. You're lucky I got stuck in Zone E with that guy that was arguing with Ida. Had to retake the test because of him, a girl with orange hair sneered. Thanks for the save though, if it hadn't been for you two that heat might have done me in, she added, looking to both Mina and Tsuyu. Oh, it was no problem, besides thanks to her I finally got to meet him, Mina said as all eyes finally began falling on Tsuyu's back. Hey yeah, you were on that video with him. How do you know him? The invisible girl asked. We met in the hospital after the blast in Mustafu, she said simply, zipping up her uniform and closing the door to her locker a little too hard as she left everyone else behind. Boys' locker room. Hey, I saw that video of yours, that was super manly of you, the redhead said, wrapping his head around Izuku's neck in a sideways hug. Izuku could only chuckle anxiously as he went along with the boy's antics. I'm Ijiro Kirishima and it's good to meet ya, he said with a large smile, showing off his fang-like teeth. Nice to meet you too, I'm Izuku Midoriya, he said as all the other boys said hello. All except Bakugo, who as soon as he had seen him, had kept his eyes on him like a hawk circling a field mouse. Izuku simply rolled his shoulders, forcing the glare to wash of him like water of a duck's back, even though in the back of his mind he had nearly his full attention. We should definitely work out together sometime, Kirishima said as he released him. Okay, that sound like fun, he said, his smile becoming more genuine. It was such a strange experience, to walk into a room, have people notice him and not laugh at or make fun of him. Was this what it was like to be popular, to have everyone want to talk to you? After so long with only Mineta by his side, he never could have imagined a day like this could come. What about you, Mineta, you looking to work out, he asked, wanting to involve his best friend in the conversation. Sure, why not, he agreed as his younger, more lazy side groaned at the obligation he had just signed himself up for. But that's the thing with training, you can never really stop if you want to keep going. Hey, I'm Denki Kaminari. Your quirk seems really similar to mine, a young yellow-haired teen said, letting arcs of yellow electricity dance between his fingers just like Izuku. Wow, yeah, I guess our quirks are similar, we should defiantly train together, he said, excited to have someone with such a seemingly similar quirk to train with. While Mineta and Tsu were great, they didn't exactly have quirks to contrast and compare with. How many lightning bolts can you shoot out? How many volts can you store up? Can you absorb electricity? He questioned, his nerdy quirk enthusiast side revealing itself. Well. Last I checked my limit was 1.3 million volts, but I don't really have any control of where it goes, and if I use too much it'll fry my brain for a bit, he said, sounding slightly embarrassed about the limitations of his quirk. Why, how many volts is your limit? He asked sheepishly. Well, I can absorb electricity from anything powered by it, so theoretically, as long as there's something nearby I can drain, I can keep going. But the doctor did say my energy was in the gigawatt range, so high 100 millions to low billion volts is my current limit. He said, estimating his current level by how many volts were in a single lightning strike and how many he could call down with a lightning storm. He didn't realize the effect his answer had until he looked back at Kaminari, whose hand had begun to twitch in shock as his mouth hung slightly agape. Kaminari tried to speak before Bakugo stepped up and walked past them. If you're done sucking him off, the teacher's waiting for us, he said dismissively as he left. What's up with him? Kirishima asked as Izuku shrugged his shoulders. After Bakugo's departure, Izuku and everyone else finished getting dressed and went down to the field, where they came to a surprising discovery. A quirk assessment test, they all collectively shouted, each face a mask of shock. But it's only the first day, the brown-haired girl pleaded. Shouldn't there be, like an orientation or something? You'll all come to find that at UA we don't exactly follow the beaten path. Meaning I and the other teachers are allowed to do whatever we want as long as get results, he said, with a shrug as if he had already predicted her question before the first word even left her mouth. After that, Aizawa began speaking about the foolishness of not allowing them to properly use their quirks for their fitness tests. That the school system and society at large still tries to force everyone to equal when they are anything but. Eventually he called on Bakugo, the blonde, giving Izuku a glaring side eye as he walked forward. What was your record in the ball throw? The teacher asked. 67 meters, he answered as the Aizawa handed him a baseball. Now try using your quirk, he said as the ashen blonde made his way to the circle. As long as you stay in the circle you can do what you want, he said dryly, and with no need for further instruction, the blonde gave a murderous grin as he shouted die. A massive explosion erupting from his hand as the ball screeched through the air. 1,200 meters, Aizawa said as the entire group gasped in shock at the display of power. All except Izuku, who watched Bakugo intently, looking for any sign of what Tsuyu had told him about. He had known Bakugo since they were children, and had been on the receiving end of his quirk for nearly as long, so he should be able to tell if there was anything different. And there was something different about it. Of all the times he had ever seen him use his quirk, whether it was small or large, it was always accompanied by plumes of dark smoke. Now that smoke was gone, and in its place were trails of white, translucent steam. And his explosions had always been scattered, imprecise. The explosive force going out in all directions, it could like a grenade and shaped only by how much he cupped his hand. Now though it was more directed, more controlled like a shaped charge with all the force going exactly where he wanted it. But still, he no sign of the heat Mina and Tsuyu had talked about. Perhaps the heat needed to slowly build up before it could be noticed. "OMG, this is going to be so much fun," he heard Mina say, which had the unfortunate effect of striking Aizawa's nerve. "If you think it's so fun, then how about this? Whoever finishes last gets expelled," he hissed as the class railed against the idea, saying that it wasn't fair. 7,632, their teacher answered back as the glass went silent at the seemingly random number, random for everyone except Izuku. "That's how many died in the terrorist attack in Mustafu," he continued. "Was it fair for them?" The class went dead silent at that, the fresh memory of the blast rubbed raw by the teacher's words. "The world is filled with unfairness. If you can't handle that, if you thought you could just goof off, then I suggest you take my advice from earlier and go home," he all but ordered as he called for the next person to go. Izuku looked at his hand, arcs of electricity bouncing between his fingers of the reminder of his mission. 7,632, they had their lives taken from them, and so many more had their lives destroyed by their loss. The memories of the shop owner Haruki and his son flashing into the forefront his mind as he clenched his fist. He would make it mean something. After that, the tests came one by one. They had watched as the brown-haired girl, whose name he still hadn't gotten, removed the gravity of the ball and threw it into space, receiving a score of infinity. Next up had been a tall girl with long black hair, who flipped through a large book she had with her. She then went on to shock everyone when she immediately undid her shirt, eliciting a nosebleed from Mineta, before she then proceeded to pull an RPG out of her stomach, attach the ball to the end and fire. 970 meters, Aizawa revealed as Izuku gawked at the power of her quirk. The RPG-7, first manufactured by the Russian defense company Basalt in 1958, with an effective firing range of 720 meters, made even greater by an advanced propellant of my own design. She beamed with a proud smile as she slung the empty rocket launcher over her shoulder and rejoined the mass of students who stared at her wide eyes. "Her quirk is so cool," Izuku whispered under his breath as he began a rapid muttering session of all the possible uses of her quirk before Mineta elbowed him in the side. Next was the 50-meter dash, and Izuku had unfortunately been paired with Bakugo, the two looking at each other but with two different expressions. Just as the test began, Bakugo surged ahead, using his explosions to fly across the distance with frightening speed as Izuku recoiled from the heat of the blonde's explosions. As Bakugo finished with a time of 3.7 seconds, Izuku wondered if he could do something similar with his lightning. He didn't think it was strong enough to allow him to fly like Bakugo, but it should allow him to clear large gaps he couldn't just jump. He eventually did get the chance to test his theory with the standing long jump as he watched Bakugo yet again use his explosions. He wondered how he should allow the electricity out. Assuming he could, if he didn't release enough energy it wouldn't work, and if he poured too much, he might just end up zapping the ground. When his turn finally came, he imaged a stream, constant and steady. Taking in a deep breath, he leaped forward, aiming his arms back and behind him and allowing the power to flow out of his palms. Immediately, plumes of electricity came pouring out with a loud buzzing sound. His balance, however, was atrocious as he struggled to keep himself steady. This proved far easier said than done as he eventually lost his balance and nearly face-planted, landing in a puff of chalking dust. Izuku, however, was not allowed a moment of celebration of a new use of his quirk, barely able to dust himself off before he heard the familiar roar of Bakugo. "Deku, don't you dare steal my moves, you bastard," he screamed as he charged the emerald-haired boy, hand raised to attack and steaming. That's when he saw it, what Tsuyu had been talking about, the heat. It is flowing out of him now, making the air around him ripple in waves. So it responds to his anger, he thought to himself. Izuku, however, had more pressing issues to deal with as his arms wreathed themselves in electricity almost by instinct alone. Their physical encounter was prematurely halted by the scarf of their homeroom teacher, which wrapped around tightly against the enraged blonde. "How is your scarf so strong?" he growled, gritting his teeth as he continued to pull against his restraints, his neck craning back as the whole class got a view of their teacher, whose eyes glowed red and hair flowing in an unseen breeze. "Because it's a capture weapon made of carbon fiber and titanium," he growled, obviously using a lot of his strength to keep the irate teen from getting closer to Izuku. "And stop making me use my quirk, it gives me dry eye," he ordered as their teacher's bloodshot eyes made Izuku finally realize who he was, Eraserhead. "Now if you're down making a fool of yourself. Stand down, you're wasting time," he said as the scarf released Bakugo and flowed back onto his shoulders like a coiled snake. The two boys stood there motionless, each eyeing the other. Izuku watching to see what Bakugo would do. The teachers at Aldera had basically given him free rein back then. But this was UA, and it seemed even he in his enraged state understood that as he made due move to continue his attack even as his red eyes glared at him. Izuku was the first to move, walking away from the sand pit, and as he was about to pass him, he heard him say something under his breath. "No matter what, you'll always be a bug," his whispered between his teeth. After that, the next few tests went by quickly, and he was pleased that Tsuyu and Mineta were doing well, with Tsuyu going after him in the standing long jump and blowing everyone else's scores out of the water with a 50-foot jump. Izuku had tried to congratulate her, but again she remained silent. Mineta meanwhile had down the best in the repeated side steps as he piled to sets of balls and bounced between them. After all the tests were done, they all waited with bated breath as one by one the names came on the screen. Students gave small cheers of victory and congratulated others, until at last the final name came up. Mina Rashido. Izuku watched as everyone looked around to see who that was, and everyone, including Izuku, saw a pink-skinned girl with horns, shaking like a leaf. Her eyes were wide, almost bulging. Mouth hung open as short, rapid breaths escaped her mouth. That's when they heard steps, hard and certain, as they watched Aizawa walk over to the girl, his aura speaking of only one thing. Her breathing grew even more frantic the closer he got, and by the time he was in front of her, she looked almost manic. "Still think this is fun," he said, compete unfazed by the distress of his soon-to-be former student. "Good," he whispered as he turned back around and walked back to his spot at the front of the class. "No one's getting expelled," he said as the headsman's axe lifted over the group and the girl collapsed onto her butt. That was simply a rational deception, but don't misunderstand, this was a one-time stay of execution. "If you fall behind, you will be left behind," he emphasized with a dark grin. "Handouts for the curriculum are in the classroom. We're done for the day," he said as he looked between Izuku and Bakugo. "Except for you two, I have something to say to both of you." "Wow, he is intense," a tall boy with black hair and tape elbows said as everyone began walk back towards the school. "Are you okay, Mina?" Kirishima asked as he helped the girl back to her feet, shaky as they were. "I thought I was about to die," she yelled, looking as if her entire life had flashed before her eyes. It was obvious that he wasn't going to expel everyone, the raven-haired girl said with a look of certainty that shocked the whole class. Izuku, though, had his doubts about that. When people lie, their heart rates usually increase, but his heart was as calm as ever. He had just been in a forgiving mood. Either way, he promised he would never end up in a situation like that. He had come too far and had so far to go. With gave him a look, silently asking him if he was all right. The idea of what their teacher wanted to talk about leaving them uneasy. And though her look was far shorter, he saw Tsuyu look back as well with concern. Izuku gave them a reassuring nod as they departed as well, leaving both him and Bakugo with Aizawa. "Now then, if you're gonna stick around, I'm going to lay down some ground rules," he said as the two boys waited expectantly. "First of all, I don't care how powerful either of you are. You do what I say when I say got it," he commanded, and while Izuku acquiesced almost immediately, Bakugo simply huffed. This prompted another surly glare from Aizawa. "And you," he pointing straight at the rebellious blonde, "if you ever attack another student outside of practice or injure them beyond a reasonable degree, you're out of here, no 3 strikes and no second chances. Do I make myself clear?" He finished, letting his warning sit in the silence. Izuku was thoroughly shocked by this. This really wasn't like his old school. "Whatever," he said dismissively, but Izuku could see that his former bully was squirming beneath the surface. He wondered in that moment if this was the first time in his life he had ever been told no and couldn't just scream and threaten to get his way. And he would be lying if he said he wasn't thoroughly enjoying the sight, seeing him experience even a fraction of the powerlessness he and Mineta had felt for so long. And for you, Midoriya, he said, now pointing stone-cold eyes at him. While your actions, illegal as they were, against those villains might have garnered you a level of respect from your fellow students and even members of faculty, you will receive no such favoritism from me, and if I find out you are still acting as a vigilante, I will personally hand you over to the police, he warned, and the tone told he was more than willing to make good on that promise. Yes, sir, he quickly answered, as Aizawa watched them for a few moments more before telling them they could leave. Rational deception. Here I thought Miss Joke was supposed to be the funny one, All Might said as Aizawa left the boys and turned the corner of one of UA training buildings. Aizawa's eyes narrowed at the mention of that woman's name, for as long as he had known her, she had constantly been annoying him. That was a rotten thing you did, All Might continued, eyes glaring at the shorter man. From her marks, Mina scored 15, and the invisible girl had been last, but you changed the results so it looked like she had come last. He accused as the shorter man looked back at him with the same tired, apathetic expression. Times are changing, All Might, and she needed to learn a lesson. If I can nip that carefree attitude in the bud and foster a proper respect for the task they are aiming to fulfill, then that's just two birds with one stone, he said, turning his head to All Might and preparing to leave. And if not, I can always get rid of them. With the day finished early, Izuku found Mineta, who like he said was chatting up Shiozaki. And surprisingly, he hadn't been slapped yet, which definitely showed progress. Deciding to all walk together, the trio made their way out, but just before the left, the main gate, Izuku felt a hand on his shoulder. Turning around, he saw the increasingly familiar face of Tenya Ida. May I walk with you, he asked, and though a small, spiteful part of him wanted to deny him, he could no longer hold onto that anger. He had apologized and had helped carry him back to the bus. Sure, we were just about to talk about Mr. Aizawa, he said as the taller boy began to walk in step with them. Mineta gave Izuku a dirty look, signaling that he was less than thrilled at the boy's presence. Izuku shrugged his shoulders at that. It wasn't like they were promising to always hang out. And if he turns out to still be annoying, we just don't hang out with him. Hey, wait up you guys, they heard a voice yell from behind as they turned to see the smiling face of the familiar brown-haired girl. Hi, we never got each other's names. I'm Ochako Uraraka, she announced as she skidded to a stop. Oh hi, I'm Izuku Midoriya, he answered back, happy to finally put a name to her face. This is Tenya, Mineta, and Shiozaki, he continued introducing each of them. Wait, if your name's Izuku, why did Bakugo call you Deku? She asked as Izuku did his best to hide a pained expression as Mineta shook his head at the numerous memories. Well, you see, Deku is a name he gave me to pick on me, he explained, the name having dug its claws in deep. Oh, I thought it sounded like you can do it. Plus, I thought it sounded cute, she said with innocent smile. Izuku turned to see Mineta's reaction, and he wore a face of bewilderment that all but yelled, "Is this girl serious?" That's nice that you thought of it that way, he said politely. But it's Izuku, he reassured. Oh okay, sorry for bringing that up, she apologized, seemingly recognizing the emotional landmine she had unwittingly stepped on. They were about to continue on before another feminine voice called out, and the group of four were greeted to the sight of Mina and Kirishima, the two coming up to them, and all of them having to reintroduce themselves. Now, what were we talking about? Izuku asked, the sudden introductions making the topic of their conversations slip his mind. We were talking about Aizawa, Mineta answered. Yes, indeed. While I am hesitant to judge our teacher's style of education, deceiving us was immoral, he added, rubbing his chin in thought. Indeed, his conduct was most sinful, Shiozaki agreed. Forget that, he came at me like the Grim Reaper. Making me think I was about to be expelled after just getting in, Mina said irately. Izuku could see where they were coming from. It hadn't exactly been the greatest introduction, but he could also see where the teacher was coming from. Are you planning on quitting though? He asked her honestly. What kind of question is that? Midoriya Kirishima asked defensively, clearly offended by the idea. The reaction making him think the two had some sort of history together, maybe they went to the same school. Looking over to Mina, though he could see hints of doubt that clouded her eyes as she averted her gaze, the bubbly and flirtatious girl from before having vanished. He's only trying to help us, he said as everyone except Mineta looked at him with surprise. He's responsible for us. If we get injured, he's the one that pays. He's right, Mineta agreed. They had both experienced the kinds of villains that will go straight for the kill and won't take it easy on them just because they're kids. You all saw me get shot. Who here has a quirk that could let them survive that? As everyone looked to Kirishima. During the test, he had been one of the only people to not use his quirk. Well, my quirk allows me to harden, he said, pulling up his sleeve and turning his skin into a hard rock-like surface. But I haven't been shot at, so, he continued, though from his tone, everyone could tell he wasn't confident in his odds. Exactly, as cruel as he was, he's just doing his best to make it, so we take this seriously, he explained. I'm not giving up, Mina said, finally speaking up for herself as all eyes fell on her. I just got here and I didn't go through all that just to give up. Being last just means I have the most room to grow, she said, that fire of positivity beginning to reignite once again. That's the spirit, Kirishima roared, flashing his fang-like teeth in a wide smile. And we'll be here if you need any help, Ida assured as everyone nodded their heads. Amongst the rallying cry, nobody except Izuku noticed the flowing long hair of Tsuyu walk by them, not even sparing them a passing glace as she left. Oh yeah, you know that girl, right? Ochako asked as Izuku nodded his head, focusing on her retreating form. Yeah, she seemed angry about something. I don't know what though, Mina confessed as Izuku sighed. Something for later, he supposed. Several hours later, Izuku lay on his bed, his mind reviewing the events of the day. The large group then went on their way to the train station, making small talk and learning that Mina and Kirishima had known each other in middle school. Likewise, Izuku and Mineta spoke about their time in middle school, at least the parts that didn't involve a certain blonde. They had said their goodbyes at the train station, and he'd had to endure a rather thorough interrogation from his mother about how his first day was, what he did, and who he talked to. After that, he had tried to search up powers that involved steam and heat, and while some were close to what he'd seen Katsuki use, nothing was a close enough match to be certain. Suddenly, he heard the buzzing of a message from his phone, and as he looked, he could feel every hair on his body stand on end. It's Moya, I have something. Izuku felt adrenaline flood his body as he read those words. It had been so long since he had last heard from her that a small part of him had wondered if he would ever hear from her again. He felt his hands begin to shake, his fingers trembling. Should he answer back, and if so, what would he say? What should he say? It seemed, though, that he would not have to answer that question as another message appeared, an address, 246 Conduit BLVD, come alone. He knew that was in the Neon District, and it was at least a 40-minute walk from here. What could possibly be there that could involve John and the Ray Sphere? Izuku looked up to his bedroom door. It was evening now, and his mother had gone to bed early, so in theory, it should be easy for him to slip out. Even still, his heart raced in his chest. He had never snuck out of his house before, and never for such an important reason. Slowly, he pulled himself up, cringing at every creak and groan from the springs in his mattress. But as he was about to stand up, the voice of Mr. Aizawa's warning rang in his ear like a church bell. If this involved vigilante work, which it inevitably would. And if he got caught, not only would he be expelled, he would end up in prison for this. Even with that threat looming over him, he did his best to smother that growing sense of fear. He had already made up his mind, hero or vigilante, he would save people. And this was more important than his dream school, more important than his freedom, and more important than his life. Because these people, those first sons, were still out there plotting who knows what, and this was his only way of finding John and the Ray Sphere, getting his answers, and make certain they never hurt anyone ever again. Standing up and walking on the balls of his feet, he carefully got ready. He would have to be careful. He could get noticed, so he needed something to hide his identity. Delving into his mind to try and remember something he could use, he was struck by a sudden realization as he made his way to the closet. As he did, he could not help but think of all the vigilantes that existed when quirks first began to manifest across the world, being forced to hide their identity for fear of both the law and villains that would inevitably come to seek revenge. He tried to open the door quietly, but it squeaked regardless of how slow he went. Rummaging through his clothes, he came to one of the few pieces of All Might merch that had been spared from his wrath that day. A yellow mask that only concealed the eyes. It had been a limited edition to promote a movie collab between All Might and the ninja hero Edgeshot. Gripping the fabric tight in his hand, he looked up to see the black and yellow jacket that he had been gifted. He had promised Haruki that he would do some good with his gifts, and tonight was the night he started keeping that promise. Slipping on his clothes and pulling the silver briefcase out from under his bed, he retrieved his electro-whip, stuffing it into the inside pocket of his jacket for concealment. He hoped he wouldn't have to use it, but it was better to safe than sorry. Once he was set, he made his way to the door, eyes staring at the knob intensely before slowly turning it, hearing every gear and spring move as he pulled it open. Staring into that dark hallway now held a sense of danger he had never associated with it before. It was as if he was young child again, waiting for the monsters that hid in the dark to jump out and get him. Taking his first tentative step forward, he was rewarded with silence as he turned around and closed the door behind him as slowly as he opened it. Sending out a radar pulse, he could see his mother lying in her bed, sleeping soundly. Slowly, step by step, and praying to God every time the floor cracked underneath him, he finally managed to get to the front door. Slipping on his shoes, he paid one last look to his darkened home before he unlocked the door and left. The moon was high in the sky, and the night air stung his lungs as a puff of mist left his mouth. He didn't have much time to stargaze, though. Moya hadn't exactly given him a time frame, but she didn't seem the type who liked waiting. Knowing this, he quickly made his way down the stairs of his apartments, his steps echoing against the concrete with every step. Once he was ground level, he started running and didn't stop. The Neon District, like its name suggested, was where the nightlife of Mustafa liked to have their fun. From the flashing pink lights of love hotels to drunken salarymen hopping from bar to bar, each made this place their home, and in all the time he had been a courier, he had never been down here 1 second longer than he had to. And all that was before the blast, now it was even worse. Whatever veneer of civility and class this place pretended to have was now completely gone. Sure, they had cleaned the place up, but only enough for customers to come. Slabs of concrete and debris from the blast filled the alleyways alongside druggies hopped up on every drug you did and didn't know existed. Working girls walked the streets, flirting with anyone that walked by and looked like they had money, and the sound of ambulances provided constant backdrop to this den of vice. Slipping between the crowds of adults who either gave him annoyed glances or didn't notice him at all. Izuku, though, kept his head down as the address he had been given replayed again and again in his mind. He was close now, barely a block away. "Hey you," the salacious voice of a woman cooed. "Don't I know you from somewhere?" Izuku knew that he should just ignore the voice and move on, but his instinct to look up to see who she was talking to was quicker than his reason. Oh, young and cute, a shapely heteromorph in revealing clothes and cow-printed skin, appraised as she swayed in place, looking down at him with half-lidded eyes that spoke of something being in her system. "Why don't you come with me? Mama can show you a real good time," she whispered as she did her best to show off her massive assets. Shocked by the woman's display, he hurried past her, doing his best to hide his blush. The woman, however, seemed to have taken offense from his refusal and began hurling obscenities at his back. But he didn't care. He refocused on the task at hand and finally made it to the address. It had been a movie theater, though from the titles that played across the rolling screens on the front, they weren't the kind of movies a family would take their kids to. As he looked around for Moya and thinking he somehow had gotten the wrong address, he again felt a buzz in his pocket. Pulling out his phone, he saw another message from Moya. Around the building, under the car, it said as he looked up from his phone. Walking around the corner, he came to the alleyways of the Neon, which were even worse than the main streets. It smelled like shit from piled-up bags of trash and the squeaking of rats fighting over the fluids that leaked out of dumpsters. And then there were the people. An orchestra of coughing filled his ears as he looked at the lines of homeless that lined the alley. Every last one was pale as a ghost, with some covered in spines, shells, and everything in between. It was like their quirks had gone haywire. Izuku pitied their situation even as he gagged, both smelling and tasting the sickness in the air. Shaking his head, he quickly moved through, doing his best to not look at any of them in the eye lest they ask for something. But he soon realized they were beyond that, their eyes staring off into distant places far from reality. Finally, on the other side, he entered what he saw to be a small parking lot, filled with several cars. Izuku groaned as he began looking under each and every one, the process taking longer than he would have liked. Eventually, he found a small bag underneath a car. Fishing it out, he found a small earpiece inside. Opening the bag, he pushed it into his ear and waited in anticipation before the sound of static and a feminine voice reached his ear. "Took your sweet time, didn't you?" the voice of Moya accused. "I'm sorry, Moya, there was more than one," he tried to explain, whispering to limit the echo of his voice. "It doesn't matter, you're here now," she said, cutting him off. "That earpiece is on an encrypted frequency, so we should be able to communicate without anyone eavesdropping," she informed. That was good, he thought. Considering everything that she said about the HPSC being compromised, it made sense to have an added layer of security. "So what did you find?" he asked, eager to get to work and find his answers. "I've been picking up some weird interference from a rooftop near your position. I need you to find and locate the source and its purpose," she ordered. Izuku then looked up and around at all the neighboring buildings. "So what exactly am I looking for?" Not sure, look around for anything that could be sending a signal. Call me when you find something, she said as Izuku was left to figure it out. All right, but how do I get up there? He thought to himself as he looked up at the buildings around him. They were a lot taller than the buildings near the beach, and he didn't exactly see himself asking to go on the roof, ending well. Heading back to the alley, he quickly found his answer as he saw a fire escape that ran the entire height of the building. Normally, these things were out of reach for most people, but Izuku was not most people. Looking around one last time to make sure that no one was watching, he pulled the mask out of his pocket and put it on. It wasn't perfect by a long shot, but hopefully it was enough. Rolling his shoulders, he jumped and latched onto the sliding ladder and climbed his way up. The clang of his shoes against the metal heralded his success as he began his ascent. As he made his way up, he wrestled with the idea of how he was supposed to find whatever was causing the interference. As he finally reached the top and looked out from his new vantage point, he realized then the enormity of his task. There were dozens of buildings, and he didn't have all night. Thinking it was a long shot, he let out another radar pulse and felt all the electricity flowing around him, bright like falling stars. But there between the stars were smaller things, like small ripples on a pond that were coming from the radar dishes and cell phones all around him. He supposed that him naming it the radar pulse was more accurate than he realized. Focusing hard on those ripples, he sifted through them, one by one, and trying anything different between them. It took him longer than he would have liked, but eventually he found something. A ripple that did not act like the rest, as if two pebbles had hit the same spot of the pond, one in front of the other. And that second ripple was hiding behind the first. Following that ripple to its source, he could see that it was coming from another rooftop several buildings away. He could use his new static thrusters to get him there faster, but he didn't know who else was prowling these rooftops. Deciding against it, he stepped back and took a running jump across the alley and continued on until he came to the source. All right, I found something, Moya. It looks like there's a portable audio drive attached to this satellite dish, he explained. See if you can listen to it with your phone, she answered back as Izuku carefully pulled the audio drive out and plugged it into his phone. Once plugged in and pressing play on the audio, he was greeted to a garbled mess of sound. Just sounds like gibberish, he informed, confused why it didn't work. It's because it's an encrypted message, but I can't break it. Look around and see if you can find any more of these, she finished, and was about to end the discussion before Izuku jumped in. Wait, do you know why so many people down here are so sick? He asked, worried about whatever was affecting them. There was a pause then, and he worried that she had ended the call and hadn't realized. It started after the blast. No one knows where it came from, but recent intelligence points in the direction of a gang called the Reapers being responsible, she revealed. Izuku's heart turned to ice. Had he indirectly caused, had that blast given those villains the opportunity to release a bioweapon? Why haven't you begun quarantining yet? He demanded. These people were as much in danger as they were a danger to others. We are doing everything we can right now. If we declared it a pandemic and began quarantining entire cities, it would only serve to cause chaos in a time where polite society is on life support, she scolded before shutting of the call. Entire cities, just how far had this spread? Izuku thought to himself, unable to shake the feeling that whatever this sickness was, it was going to get worse. But right now, he wasn't in a position to argue as he sent out another radar pulse, searching for that same double ripple, and found another about a block away. Knowing where he needed to go, he began traversing the rooftops, climbing up pipes and air windowsills until he came to a large street, filled with the light of cars that drove past. It was far too wide for him to jump, and he wasn't about to try and use his new power when failure would mean a swift meeting with a 2-ton car. Looking around for another way to bridge the gap, he finally found a wire that went from one side to the other. Getting there and having a closer look, he hoped it would be able to support his weight. Steadying himself, he jumped on, letting the electrical current carry him slowly across the wire, going as slow as he needed to keep his electricity from shining too brightly. When he was about halfway across, however, the line snapped, and Izuku's heart caught in his throat as gravity gripped him. Instinctively, he pushed his arms out in front of him and unleashed his static thrusters, as branches of electrical energy forced him back up. Wobbling, he managed to get close enough that he could latch onto the side of the building. Taking deep breaths to calm his nerves, he climbed up the rest of the way, feet finally landing on something solid as he let out a nervous laugh. Quickly looking back over the edge, he could see that the fallen electrical wire had provided a good distraction as the wave of cars stopped entirely, and everyone's eyes were focused on the sparking wire. Thankful for that, he kept moving until he finally reached the second satellite dish and found a similar audio drive in it. Pulling it out and repeating the process, he was once again greeted by a mess of garbled words. "It's just more of the same, Moya," he said, disappointment filling his voice. "I'm running the signals through a decryption program on my end. I've almost cracked it, I just need another sample." "Look around for more," she told him as Izuku looked at the time on his phone. It was nearly 2 o'clock and he was running out of time. Sending out another pulse, he felt another signal, further away this time. Jumping from rooftop to rooftop, he stopped dead in his tracks when he heard something just around the corner. His breath shallow and his feet light, he crept closer until he saw the unmistakable red coat of a Reaper. He didn't know he was there, hidden eyes staring out across the cityscape. Izuku's eyes went wide as turned back around, pressing his back into the concrete as he slowly inched away. Sending out another radar pulse, he could see that the Reaper was not alone. There were several other people on nearby rooftops as Izuku breathed through his teeth. "Moya, we have a problem. Reapers are crawling all over the place," he whispered as he sensed that the villain wasn't alone. "Just keep to the shadows, we don't want anyone finding you here," she said as Izuku ran his mind through all sorts of scenarios. Should he get down to ground level and use the alleyways for cover? No, the Reapers were probably using their vantage points to watch the alleys for anyone going through them. He had to stick to the rooftops and be as quiet as he could. Moving quietly and constantly sending out radar pulses, he made his way to the other side of the roof. Giving one last look in the direction of the idle Reaper, he hopped off and latched onto a pipe and shimmied his way up. On and on he went, stopping whenever a Reaper began to move and holding his breath every time. There were so many of them that he wondered what exactly had caused them to all to be here. Was a base of operation near here? Were they waiting for something? But he had no time to wonder as he saw his opportunity to move forward. Crossing quickly and landing on the balls of his feet, he felt himself getting closer. He could see it now. The satellite dish was on the other side of a parking lot surrounded by buildings. The bright street lights shining down on a lone Reaper that stood silently in the center. "Have to keep moving," he said to himself as he finally got to the satellite dish and quickly pulled out the final audio drive. Plugging it in, he felt his heart sink when he again heard nothing but gibberish. "That was the last one, Moya. What happened?" he asked as he pressed himself against an air conditioner. "Give me a second. All right, I have it. I'm uploading a decrypting algorithm into your phone. That should let you hear the messages," she quickly said. Trusting her, he turned down the volume of his phone and pressed the phone to his ear as the third message finally played. "I couldn't stop Kessler from detonating the ray sphere. Dame Thing took out 5 or 6 blocks and killed God knows how many. Found the ray sphere in the blast crater next to some kid. Didn't know if he was dead or not, didn't have time to check. I'm gonna try and hole up somewhere. If anyone is even listening to these things, I need immediate extraction. Please, you have to find me before he does," the voice frantically pleaded. "I can't believe it, that's John," Moya said in astonishment. "He must have been using these dishes as dead drops for his handlers." "Meaning?" Izuku asked, his own mind brimming with questions. Had John been the voice he had heard? He didn't think so, but he couldn't be sure. "Meaning there are probably more of those dead drops scattered across the city. You should try and find as many as you can. They might be able to tell us where he took the ray sphere," she told him. But as he was about to continue, he was stopped by the sound of talking back on the street level. "Wait. Something's happening," he whispered as he crawled his way to the side of the building and saw someone talking to the Reaper on the parking lot. The new person was tall and lanky, and they wore a stark white hoodie with black markings in the image of a skeleton. "You know your job," the person said, their voice echoing in the emptiness around them. The smaller Reaper furiously nodded his head as the white-cloaked Reaper pulled a small backpack off his shoulder. "Get this to the usual spot and our mistress will be most pleased," he said, but as the smaller Reaper was about to take it, only for the taller one to pull it away. "But if you fail, you'll beg for death," he promised, finally handed the backpack to the Reaper courier, who wasted no time to start running. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. "Yeah, follow that villain and find out what's in that package," she ordered as the white-robed Reaper seemed to shimmer before disappearing. The Reaper moved like a bat out of hell, running from alley to alley and constantly stopping and turning around that it almost made Izuku think he knew someone was watching him. After following him for several blocks, the Reaper finally entered a small underpass. Jumping down from his vantage point, he crawled along the side of the wall, sending out his radar pulses to watch as the Reaper pushed the bag underneath a vending machine and run off. Turning the corner, Izuku walked to the vending machine, getting down on one knee, pulling it out. The backpack was heavy and clanged like there was metal inside. Turning his head to his left and right to be certain no one else was around, he unzipped it and was greeted to the pleasant light of blast shards, their glow shining beautifully in the dark. "I got the package, Moya," he confirmed as he pulled himself out of his hypnotic fascination and noticed the package had a second compartment. "Find anything useful?" Moya chimed in as opened the second compartment and found a small note and read it out loud. "It just says that they need to up their production and that their mistress has something big planned," he repeated. "That doesn't sound good. It seems these are about to get serious." "I'll see about getting this information in the right hands," she said, sounding legitimately concerned. "There are also these blast shards too," he admitted, while something deep within him wanted not to tell her he knew what was right. "Blast shard, you mean rayosite fragments?" Moya questioned as Izuku confirmed. "Keep them. Consider it pay for a job well done," she said, the act of kindness shocking the boy after all the attitude he had been getting up till now. "But Moya, I heard that these things were dangerous for people with quirks," he said, hoping to glean some information now that she was in an agreeable mood. "They are dangerous and we don't have a clear explanation, but from what our scientists are telling us is that the powers bestowed by the ray sphere are different," she explained, as the new information finally helped fill in the gaps for so many questions he had. Why his powers seemed so broad. He could control electricity, but he could also change the weather and call down lightning. He could create blast of electrokinetic energy and detect radio waves. Not even mentioning his newfound durability, strength, and healing factor. It was almost as if he had several quirks. "Thank you for telling me that, and don't worry, Moya, I'm sure we'll find John soon," he reassured, a part of him knowing that her short fuse was from losing her husband. If his mother had disappeared, he didn't what he would do. "Oh, thank you, Midoriya. I hope we find him soon too," she said as she ended the call and Izuku was left with a package full of blast shards. Now what to do with it, he thought to himself. He could just absorb the shards right here and now and take all the power, or he could go to Tsuyu's place. Her powers were different like his and they could share it. It would definitely be a good gift and at least get them talking again. Eventually, and even with the promising glow of the blast shards, the zipped the backpack back up. He was taking it to Tsuyu and hopefully they could have that chat. Tsuyu lay in her bed, staring into the void of her room as the garbage bag taped to her window flapped again and again. It had been over a month and still her parents hadn't called someone to replace it, not that they had the money for it anyway. But even with that incessant flapping, it was not that which kept her up tonight. No, that honor was held by a certain forest-haired boy whose face hung in her mind like a framed portrait. Why did you just walk off like that? She raged at herself as she ran tense fingers through her long hair. Was she jealous of the attention that he was getting from all those other girls? The thought made her groan in embarrassment. It sounded so trivial, so immature and childish. Was she upset that he didn't kiss her? That would be even worse of a reason. She had been treating Izuku like a leper over nothing, and it was eating her alive. Maybe she could text him and tell him she's sorry. But what would she say? "Hey Izuku, I'm sorry I've been avoiding you because I'm a jealous bitch," she mocked to herself, the whole situation making her want to scream. Tick 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 came a noise from her window, like pebbles striking the plastic. Tick tick tick, "Tsuyu, it's me," came the voice of Izuku. Instantly, Tsuyu leaped up on her bed and ripped the plastic aside and was greeted by the same blue-eyed boy standing on the roof of a neighboring apartment building. "Izuku, what are you doing here?" she whispered in shock, sticking her head out the window and looking around to see if anyone was watching. "I wanted to see you. Can I come in?" he said, and Tsuyu felt her face turn hot and red at the request, her mind filling with dirty and wonderfully horrible ideas. She was just happy she never gained the habit of sleeping in the nude. Sure, come in quickly, but be quiet, my parents are home," she urged as the emerald-haired boy stepped back and took a running jump, letting his powers flow from his hands like Katsuki, the thought of him automatically making her brow furrow as he latched onto the windowsill. Tsuyu did her best to help pull him through the small window, grabbing him by the jacket and hoisting him in as the pair fell back on the bed. With a small oof of their bodies hitting the bed, they found themselves in the same situation as they had before, eyes staring into each other as Tsuyu felt his weight on her. "I'm sorry, Tsuyu," he apologized, quickly getting off of her and stirring a small amount of disappointment in her. "I came here to give you something," he said as he took the backpack of his shoulder. Tsuyu watching as he unzipped the bag, and her voice caught in her throat as the room was illuminated by the purple glow of blast shards. "Where did you get those?" she hurriedly asked, nearly leaping off the bed and switching between looking at him and the shards. She watched as Izuku stumbled a little of his words, explaining that he had been out looking for shards for them to share. Tsuyu had a sense of suspicion about if that was all there was to his story, but that feeling was drowned out by a feeling of self-hatred. Here she had been, spinning her wheels on how to apologize to Izuku, yet here he was giving her something. Izuku, though, didn't waste any time, crouching down and depositing the shards on the floor in a pile. The glow of the shards, now unrestrained by their packaging, now filled the room completely. Each of their features accented by the glow, as each seemed to wait for the other to go first. But Tsu hesitated. Ever since she had absorbed that first shard, she had felt her body changing. Her feet and hands had gotten smaller, her gloves now barely fitting, and her mouth and tongue that were once the defining features of her face had shrunk as well. It hadn't happened all at once, a few inches here, a few millimeters there, but slowly she was changing into something else, something normal, something she had wanted for so long. So why was she hesitating? "Tsuyu, are you okay?" Izuku asked as she felt wet lines streak down her cheeks. She rubbed them away, quick to hide her embarrassment, but unable to play off the look of concern that he was giving her. Should she tell him? Would he understand? She didn't know, but she wanted to believe that he could. Sighing, she walked towards the bed and sat down, the springs creaking as she motioned for Izuku to sit next to her. As he did, she exhaled through her nose. She was so used to being the rock for her younger siblings that she found it strange to be the one to open up. "I'm sorry about what I did," she said, eyes low and unable to look at him as she stared at the shards, the alien glow feeling so soothing. "Oh, it's okay, Tsu, it was a little sudden, but," he tried to say. "It's not just that. Even since then I've been cold to you and you didn't deserve that," she said as Izuku put a hand on her shoulder, the weight grounding her spirit. "I told you it's okay," he repeated, twisting himself so that she was forced to look him in the eye. "But something tells me this isn't just about what happened between us," he said, more a statement than a question as Tsu's lips turned into a thin line and she gathered the strength to speak. "It's just I've wanted something like this for so long," she continued, the admission feeling both relieving and condemnable. "Something like this, what do you mean?" Izuku questioned. "Who's your favorite hero?" she asked, and she could tell he was confused by the seemingly random question. "Well, All Might was my favorite for a long time, but now," he said, sounding unsure as he shrugged his shoulders, and Tsu gave a hollow smile. "Mine was Mirko," she admitted. "The rabbit hero?" he questioned as she nodded her head. "So why do you have her on a dart board?" he asked as he pointed a finger to the punctured picture. Tsu was surprised that he had noticed, but she'd found that he was the kind of person that was always looking around. "It's a love-hate relationship," she said as her shoulders slumped, two forces in her mind battling for dominance. "When you asked me why I wanted to be a hero and I said freedom, I wanted to be free like her. She was everything that Tsu was not. Strong, confident, and beautiful, a mountain she'd been told all her life she could never climb. But at the same time, for all her positives, there was a glaring negative that made her grind her teeth. I always wanted to be a hero to Izuku. I wanted to be a hero so I could take my brother and sister away from here. But where a quirkless person has no one, all we heteromorphs have is her," she finished, her last few words growled out. "Well, what's wrong with her?" he asked, and Tsu had to stop herself from laughing. What wasn't wrong with her? "She wears a bunny suit with half her ass hanging out," she seethed, he frustration coming front and center. "She's the most popular heteromorph for the most obvious reason. Look at her and tell me that's a great role model." "Well, there's Gang Orca, and," he said as his mind drew a blank of any other popular heteromorphs that were even in the top 100. "Exactly, and Gang Orca is the #1 hero that looks like a villain," she affirmed. "At best we're treated like fetishes, and at worst we're treated like freaks, and all my life I've been treated like nothing but a freak, a bug-eyed man-handed freak," she said as memories of venomous giggles and condescending stares filled her mind. "The only thing I had was gymnastics, my quirk allowing me one thing to be proud of, but as my body changed to fit a frog's, my quirk took that from me too," she said as the tears flowed once more and she didn't have the strength to wipe them away. "You have no idea how lucky you were to be born quirkless," she said, praying she didn't sound insensitive. He had suffered too, and she knew it was wrong to compare, but she couldn't help it. "When you go outside, people just see you as a normal person. They would never know you were quirkless. But me, I can't hide this. I could never pretend to be normal, and now that I have the chance to be, and now these shards are giving you the chance to get rid of your frog quirk. But even though it has caused you so much pain, you're afraid to let it go because it's a part of you," he guessed as she looked at him in shock, a wave of relief crashing into her. He did understand. "And then I met you in that hospital bed, and you treated me like I was normal, treating me better than anyone I can remember. Talking to me, wanting to be around me, almost dying for me. And I fucked it all up, she said, beginning to lose control of her breathing. And as she finished, that same feeling of self-hatred came back. What the hell was she doing talking to him about this? This wasn't about her, this was about him. He had come to give her a gift when he had done nothing wrong, and now she was throwing all this emotional baggage at his feet. What the fuck was wrong with her? I'm sorry about all of this, you shouldn't be forced to listen to, she tried to say before she felt a pair of soft lips press against hers. Tsu nearly gasped as their lips connected, her eyes going wide as every nerve in her body lit up in surprise. He kept his lips against hers as she began to reciprocate, wrapping her arms around his neck as tears began to fall from her face. It was clunky and awkward at first, both completely new to this as her wide mouth made the kiss more difficult, but as they went, they helped each other learn as their tongues began to dance together. In real time, the kiss lasted less than a minute, but to each other it was a small, blissful eternity. When the kiss finally ended, the two breathed deeply, taking in much-needed air. Once again they stared into each other's eyes, a new understanding and acceptance blossoming between them. I can't pretend to fully understand the pain you've gone through, but I want to be there for you and help make the pain stop, he whispered, squeezing her hand gently. I won't ask you to change because to me, you've always been beautiful, he swore as her heart soared, finally hearing the words she'd always wanted to hear. Tsu said nothing, fearing that she would break down into tears if she did. Instead, she pulled him close to kiss him again, enjoying this moment to the fullest, as though at any moment she would wake up to this being all a dream. A dream she did not want to wake up from. But as they each pulled away again and the glow of the blast shards radiated with an unanswered question, she knew she had a choice to make. It took her a while to answer, two sides of her fighting for dominance. If she took the shards, no one would ever look at her and think, what a freak, ever again, and her new quirk had been useful. She never would have been able to save all those people during the exam without it. And there was no guarantee that the changes would stop. Maybe these shards would only speed up what was already inevitable. But if she didn't take the shards, would she become recognizable? Would her parents even recognize her? Would her siblings even recognize her? That was when she made up her mind. She was becoming a hero for them, to take them away from this place, and to do that she needed to be strong as she could possibly be, and as much as it pained her, as profitable as she could possibly be. And she couldn't do that looking like a heteromorph. She didn't have any dreams of changing the system or changing people's hearts. She didn't have the power and she didn't have the time. Her siblings would always come first, and the rest of heteromorph kind would have to go on without her. I'm ready, she affirmed as she took in several deep breaths and stood up and made her way to the pile of shards. And it was only then did they both realize that neither could touch it without accidentally absorbing all of them. This time, though, it was Tsu that had the answer as she moved off to the corner of her room and retrieved a large umbrella, using the pointy end to sort them. There were 7 shards, leaving 3 for her and 3 for him. You can have the last one, Tsuyu said. You went to all this trouble, so you deserve it, she urged as Izuku like he was about to offer the final piece to her. On 3, she said as Izuku nodded. Her heart was racing, a bead of sweat running down her neck. 3, 2, 1. As their hands touched the piles, the room was filled with a brilliant light as the power of the shards flowed into them. She felt the bones in her face begin to shift. She could feel her tongue shrinking by the millisecond, her hands and feet alongside it. When the light finally dissipated, the room was once more cast into its natural darkness. Moving her way through the darkness, Tsuyu easily found the light switch, flicking it on and getting a good look at Izuku. For Izuku, his transformation seemed almost entirely internal, with only his eyes shining a more deep and vivid blue. But from the way he was looking at her, she could tell the same wasn't for her. Walking quickly towards the vanity, she stared in awe at her new self. Her eyes that once took up so much of her face were now normal, and her lips once pencil-thin and stretched nearly from ear to ear were now full and normal. But it was what was inside her mouth that told her the true extent of her change as she stuck out her tongue. A tongue that once could stretch nearly 20 meters was now barely 5 inches long. She reached a hand up to touch it but realized just how small they were now. It all didn't even seem real, like she could pinch herself and she'd wake up back in her bed. Looking down at her feet, she marveled at how tiny they were, sticking one foot out and twisting it around so she could see every angle. I'm definitely gonna need new shoes, as thought to herself as she giggled like a child out of nervousness. Looking back up to Izuku, who up until this point had remained silent, she stretched out her arms so that he could see all of her. How do I look? She asked, an anxious smile on her face. As beautiful as you did 5 minutes ago, He answered with a smile of his own as he walked up to her, wrapping a hand around her waist and tiniest shade of blush on her face. But before they could continue their earlier fun, Izuku's eyes went wide as he looked at the clock. 6 a.m., my mother's gonna be up soon, I got to get going, he warned as he went to grab the empty package. And it was only when he was about to jump out the window did her feel a tug at his arm and a familiar set of lips on his cheek. After class, we are going shopping, she told him, already thinking about how much of her wardrobe she'll need to change. That should be easy, you look good in everything, he answered back as Tsuyu's face burned red with love. Was this what love felt like? As she watched him take a 4-story fall without missing a beat run out of sight, she turned once more and began to experiment with her new body. Jumping lightly on her newly shrunken feet, she knew she was gonna have to buy new ones. She stretched in every direction she could think of, cracked her knuckles and rolled her shoulders. All in all, she had never felt stronger. There was new strength in her limbs. A strength she didn't fully understand, but one she would not deny, and with the sound of her parents' alarm in her ears and renewed purpose in her heart, she would take it for all it was worth. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.